My name is Elizabeth Lawson. I am 29 years old, and I live in the city. The crystal glasses on the dining table sparkled under the chandelier, but the mood in the room was pitch black. I sat there, hands folded tightly in my lap, while my family tore me apart piece by piece. It was supposed to be a celebration, but it felt like an execution. My father called me embarrassing. My mother nodded in agreement, sipping her expensive wine. My brother, Marcus, laughed and mocked my little career. I took it all in silence, just like I always did. Then came the final blow. My father pointed a finger at me across the roast turkey. His face was red with impatience. "Pack your bags, Elizabeth," he said loud enough to make the silverware shake. "This is the last Christmas you are invited to until you get your life together. We are done dealing with a failure." The room went silent. They expected tears. They expected me to beg for another chance. But I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt a cold, hard clarity. I stood up slowly. I didn't scream. I just picked up my purse. "Merry Christmas," I said. I walked out the front door into the snow. They thought they were cutting off a dead limb. They had no idea they had just declared war on their landlord. My father told me to leave his house, but he forgot one very important thing. I own the building his law firm rents, and I was about to remind him exactly who I am. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Elizabeth Lawson. I am 29 years old. I drove away from my parents' house with the heater blasting. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but my eyes were dry. You might think I was shaking from sadness, but I wasn't. It was adrenaline. It was the physical reaction to 29 years of holding my breath. To understand why walking out of that Christmas dinner was so significant, you have to understand the 29 years that came before it. You have to understand what it is like to grow up in a house where love is a limited resource, and it has already been allocated to someone else. My brother, Marcus, is 2 years older than me. From the moment he was born, he was the sun in my parents' solar system. I was just a stray asteroid floating around in the cold dark, occasionally bumping into things. It started small. When we were kids, if Marcus drew a picture, it went on the fridge with a gold magnet. If I drew a picture, my mother would say, "That's nice, Elizabeth, but don't leave your crayons on the table." When Marcus learned to ride a bike, my father ran behind him for hours, cheering, filming every wobble with his camcorder. When I learned, I fell into a rosebush and scratched my face. I walked inside crying, bleeding, and my father looked up from his newspaper and said, "Elizabeth, stop crying. You're being dramatic. Go put a Band-Aid on it." That was the word that defined my childhood, dramatic. If I was sad, I was dramatic. If I was proud of a test score, I was boasting. If I was quiet, I was sullen. There was no way to win. By the time we got to high school, the gap between us was a canyon. Marcus was the golden boy. He was the quarterback of the football team. He was the class president. He was charming, handsome, and he knew exactly how to talk to adults to make them think he was a genius. I was different. I was quiet. I liked numbers. I liked logic. I didn't have 100 friends. I had 3 close ones. I didn't play sports. I joined the investment club. My parents didn't understand me, so they decided I was flawed. I remember the day college acceptance letters came. It was a Tuesday in April. The mail came through the slot in the door. Marcus had applied to Harvard. It was the only school my father cared about. It was his alma mater. The legacy had to continue. I picked up the big envelope for Marcus. Harvard. He got in. I also held my own letter. I had applied to the state university for their business program. It wasn't Ivy League, but it had one of the best real estate programs in the country. I got in with a full academic scholarship. I put both letters on the kitchen table and waited. When my parents came home, the celebration for Marcus was deafening. My father popped a bottle of champagne, even though it was a Tuesday. My mother was crying tears of joy. They called grandma, they called the neighbors. They talked about how the family name was safe. "A lawyer," my father beamed, clapping Marcus on the back. "Another Lawson at Harvard Law. This is the proudest day of my life." I sat there, smiling, waiting for a pause. Finally, during a lull in the noise, I pushed my letter forward. "I got in too," I said softly. "State. Full scholarship." My father looked at the letter like it was a bill he didn't want to pay. "State," he said, his smile fading. "Well, that's practical. Good for you, Elizabeth. At least we won't have to pay for it." That was it. No champagne. No calls to the neighbors, just practical. The message was clear. Marcus was destined for greatness. I was destined to be average. They groomed him. Every dinner conversation was about his future. They talked about the law firm my father built, Lawson and Associates. They talked about which judges they needed to impress. They talked about the country club membership Marcus would inherit. I was there, physically, but I was invisible. I remember one specific night during my senior year of college. I had just won a national case competition for business strategy. My team beat out teams from Yale and Stanford. I was the team lead. It was a huge deal. I came home for the weekend, bursting to tell them. We sat down for dinner. Before I could even open my mouth, my mother turned to Marcus. "Marcus, tell your father about the girl you met at the mixer." And for 45 minutes, we listened to Marcus talk about a girl named Courtney whose father was a senator. My parents hung on his every word. When the dessert came, I finally tried. "I won the national business strategy competition yesterday," I said. My mother looked at me, her fork halfway to her mouth. "That's nice, dear. Did you get a trophy?" "Yes, and a cash prize and—" "Marcus," my father interrupted, turning back to my brother. "Make sure you send flowers to Courtney. The senator is a very powerful man. We need to think about your network." I looked down at my plate. The excitement in my chest died, replaced by that familiar, heavy coldness. It wasn't just that they didn't care. It was that they didn't see me. They had a narrative in their heads. In their story, Marcus was the star, and I was the supporting character who needed to stay out of the way. I stopped trying to impress them that night. I realized that no matter what I did, I would never be enough. If I cured cancer, they would ask why I didn't do it at Harvard. If I became president, they would critique my outfit at the inauguration. So I made a choice. A quiet, dangerous choice. I decided to stop sharing my life with them. If they thought I was small, I would let them think I was small. If they thought I was struggling, I would let them think I was struggling. I would build my life in the shadows where they couldn't criticize it. I graduated top of my class. They didn't come to the ceremony because Marcus had a minor rowing accident and hurt his wrist. They stayed with him. I walked across the stage alone. I started working immediately. I didn't take the safe, low-level jobs they suggested. I went into commercial real estate. I took risks. I worked 18-hour days. But when I went home for holidays, I wore simple clothes. I drove a used Honda Civic I kept specifically for visiting them. I told them I was a consultant and kept the details vague. They nodded with pity. "It's a tough market," my father would say, slipping me a $100 bill like I was a teenager. "Don't worry, Elizabeth. Maybe you'll meet a nice lawyer soon who can take care of you." I took the $100. I said thank you. And then I would drive back to the city, deposit the money into a charity account, and go back to building my empire. They created a ghost. They created a failure. And for years, I played the role perfectly. Until tonight. Tonight, the ghost decided to speak. To understand why my family couldn't see my success, you have to understand their definition of the word. For the Lawsons, success wasn't about money. Well, it was, but it had to be the right kind of money. Old money, prestige money. Success meant a Juris Doctor degree on the wall. It meant being a partner at a firm. It meant wearing suits that cost more than most people's cars and drinking scotch that tasted like smoke and leather. It meant belonging to the Oakwood Country Club and playing golf with judges on Saturday mornings. If you didn't fit that mold, you didn't matter. My father, Richard Lawson, was a man obsessed with image. He built his law firm, Lawson and Associates, from the ground up. He was a shark in the courtroom and a snob in the living room. He believed that the world was divided into two groups: the people who made the rules and the people who followed them. He raised Marcus to be a rule maker. He raised me to be, well, he didn't really raise me to be anything. He just expected me to find a husband who was a rule maker. The hierarchy in our family was rigid. It was set in stone. Tier 1, the patriarch, my father, the source of all money and approval. Tier 2, the heir, Marcus, the future of the firm, the golden son. Tier 3, the wife, my mother. Her job was to look beautiful, host parties, and agree with my father. Tier 4, the disappointment, me. This hierarchy was reinforced at every single family gathering. It wasn't subtle, it was brutal. Let me tell you about Thanksgiving, just a month before the Christmas blowout. I arrived at the house wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans. I parked my old Honda in the driveway, behind Marcus's brand new Porsche. The contrast was intentional on my part, but to them, it was just proof of my failure. I walked into the kitchen. My mother was arranging flowers. She didn't look up. "Elizabeth, you're late," she said. "I'm 5 minutes early, Mom." "Well, the caterers are already here. Can you stay out of their way? Go set the table." I went to the dining room. Marcus was there, pouring himself a drink. He was wearing a suit, of course. He always wore a suit, even on weekends. He looked me up and down and smirked. "Hey, Liz, still driving that piece of junk?" "It gets me from point A to point B," I said, picking up a stack of napkins. "Dad was saying he's worried the bumper might fall off in the driveway. Bad for property values," Marcus laughed. He took a sip of his drink. "So, what is it you do again?" "Consulting." He made air quotes around the word. "It's going well," I said, keeping my voice even. "Business is steady." "Steady," he scoffed. "That's code for I'm barely making rent, isn't it? Look, Liz, if you need a loan, just ask. It's pathetic watching you pretend you're doing okay." "I'm fine, Marcus." "Sure, whatever you say." Dinner was worse. My father sat at the head of the table. Marcus sat to his right, my mother to his left. I was placed at the end, next to the kitchen door. The conversation revolved entirely around the firm. "We landed the Henderson account," my father announced, slicing the turkey. Marcus did the heavy lifting on the brief. "Brilliant work, son." "It was nothing," Marcus said, feigning modesty. "Just applied the precedents you taught me, Dad." "Nonsense, you have the instinct. That's something you can't teach. You either have it or you don't." My father's eyes flickered to me for a second when he said you don't. "So, Elizabeth," my mother chirped, trying to do her duty of including me. "Are you seeing anyone?" "I saw the Miller boy is single again. He's a dermatologist." "No, Mom, I'm focusing on my career." My father let out a loud, dismissive snort. "Career," he muttered. "Elizabeth, shuffling papers for a few small businesses isn't a career. It's a hobby. A career builds a legacy. A career commands respect." "My work is important to me," I said, tightening my grip on my fork. "But is it important to anyone else?" he asked. It was a cruel question. "Does anyone know your name, Elizabeth? If you stopped working tomorrow, would the city notice?" I bit my tongue. Yes, I wanted to scream. The city would notice because I own 3 city blocks. The city would notice because I just approved the zoning for the new hospital wing. The city would notice because I employ 400 people. But I said nothing. "I just want you to be realistic," my father continued, pouring more wine. "You're nearly 30. You're living in a tiny apartment. You're driving a dangerous car. You have no husband. You have no prospects. We worry about you. It's embarrassing for us to have to explain your situation to our friends." "Embarrassing?" I repeated. "Yes, people ask what you're doing, and we have to change the subject. Marcus is making partner next year. That's a headline. You are a footnote." My mother reached out and patted my hand. It felt condescending, not comforting. "We just want you to be happy, dear, and we know you can't be happy living like that." They truly believed it. They believed I was miserable. They believed I was poor. They believed I was nothing without their approval. To them, I was a liability. I was the one flaw in the perfect Lawson family portrait. They needed me to be the failure. It made Marcus look better. If I was successful, it would confuse them. It would break their worldview. If the quiet, unambitious daughter was actually powerful, then their entire system of judgment was wrong. And Richard Lawson was never wrong. So they kept me in the box. They mocked my clothes, which were high-quality cashmere just without logos. They mocked my silence, which was observation, not stupidity. They mocked my life. I sat there at Thanksgiving, eating dry turkey, listening to them plan their Christmas party. "We need to invite the judges," Marcus said. "And the partners." "Of course," my father said. "It will be a celebration of the firm's best year yet. Lawson and Associates is untouchable." I looked down at my plate and smiled a tiny, secret smile. "Untouchable?" I thought. "Dad, you don't even know who signs your lease." That was the moment I knew the secret couldn't last forever. The pressure was building. Their arrogance was getting too heavy to bear. I left Thanksgiving early. I told them I had a headache. "Probably from the stress of being broke," Marcus whispered as I walked out. I got into my Honda, drove 3 blocks, and pulled into a gas station. I sat there for a moment, breathing. Then, I pulled out my phone and checked my bank balance. Seeing the numbers calmed me down. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about the freedom to walk away, the freedom to know they were wrong. I didn't know then that Christmas would be the end, but looking back, the fuse was already lit. They just didn't hear the hissing sound. After my father told me to pack my bags at Christmas, I didn't go to a friend's house to cry. I didn't go to a cheap motel. I got into my car, the embarrassing Honda Civic, and drove 5 miles to a private garage in the city center. I parked the Honda in its spot, covered it with a tarp, and walked 10 feet to my other car, a silver Aston Martin D11. I tossed my bag into the passenger seat, slid behind the leather wheel, and started the engine. The roar of the motor felt like a conversation the Honda could never have. This was me. This was the real Elizabeth. I drove out of the garage and headed toward the Skyline District. My parents thought I lived in a studio apartment in a rundown neighborhood called the Heights. I did rent an apartment there. It cost me $900 a month. I kept it empty, except for a futon and some thrift store furniture, just in case they ever insisted on visiting. They visited once, 3 years ago. They looked around with disgust, spent 10 minutes sitting on the edge of the futon and left. They never came back. It was the best $900 a month I ever spent. But that wasn't my home. I drove toward the Spire Tower. It is the tallest residential building in the city. I pulled into the private underground entrance. The valet nodded at me, "Good evening, Miss Lawson," and I took the private elevator to the top floor. The penthouse. I walked in, and the lights automatically adjusted to a warm, welcoming glow. My home is 4,000 square feet of glass, steel, and white marble. The floor-to-ceiling windows offer a 360-degree view of the city. I can see everything from here. The twinkling lights of the bridges, the dark curve of the river, and the clustered skyscrapers of the financial district. I kicked off my shoes, cheap flats I wore for my mother, and walked barefoot across the heated floors to the wine cellar. I didn't grab the cheap grocery store wine I brought to family dinners. I pulled out a bottle of 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon, valued at $800. I poured a glass, took a deep sip, and felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. I walked to my office. It's a room that my father would have killed for. A massive mahogany desk, 3 monitors, and a wall of awards, real awards, from industry leaders who respected me. I sat down and opened my laptop. This was my secret. This was the empire the mouse had built. While Marcus was partying at law school, I was getting my MBA and working as an analyst. I saw opportunities where others saw risk. I lived on ramen noodles for 4 years, saving every penny, and bought a distressed warehouse. I renovated it, leased it to a tech startup, and sold it for triple the price. I didn't buy shoes. I bought duplexes. I didn't go on vacation. I bought strip malls. I didn't date. I bought apartment complexes. I formed a holding company, Sterling Property Management. To the world, Sterling was a faceless, powerful corporation. To me, it was just a dashboard on my computer. I clicked on the Portfolio Summary tab. Total assets under management, $340 million. Properties owned, 47. Commercial occupancy rate, 98%. I scrolled through the list of properties. I own the retail center on 5th Street. I own the logistics hub near the airport. I own the luxury condos on the waterfront. But there was one property that mattered more than all the others combined. Asset number 12, the Sterling Center. It was a 20-story Class A office building in the heart of the legal district. It was prestigious. It was expensive. It was the kind of address that screamed power. I bought it 5 years ago. It was a hostile takeover of a failing REIT. I snatched it up quietly. And the anchor tenant, occupying the top 3 floors, Lawson and Associates. My father's firm. When I bought the building, I saw his name on the rent roll. I remember freezing. I almost sold the building immediately. But then I thought, no, this is business. I instructed my property managers to never reveal the name of the owner. They were told to handle everything through the corporate entity Sterling Property Management. All emails, all notices, all lease negotiations went through my team. My father never asked who owned Sterling. He was too arrogant. He assumed it was some foreign investment group or a conglomerate in New York. He didn't care, as long as the lobby was clean and the elevators worked. For 5 years, I had been his landlord. Every month, he paid rent to the daughter he called a failure. Every time he complained about the air conditioning, he was complaining to me. Every time he walked into that building, he was walking on my floor. I looked at the screen. I clicked on the file for Lawson and Associates. I had protected them. Over the years, when they were late on rent because a client hadn't paid, I told my team to waive the late fees. When they wanted to renovate the conference room without proper permits, I looked the other way. I did it because I still wanted his love. I thought, I'm helping him. I'm a good daughter, even if he doesn't know it. But tonight changed everything. Pack your bags, this is the last Christmas you're invited to. The words echoed in the empty penthouse. I took another sip of wine. The sadness was gone. It was replaced by the cold, hard logic of a businesswoman who had just been insulted by a tenant. My father loved rules. Fine, let's look at the rules. I opened the folder labeled Lease Violations, Lawson and Associates. It was full. Most landlords don't keep a detailed dossier of every mistake their tenants make. They just want the rent check. But I am meticulous. I keep records of everything. And Lawson and Associates were terrible tenants. They were arrogant. They treated the building staff like servants. They ignored policies because they thought they were too important to follow them. I scrolled through the list of documented violations stored in the digital file. Violation 1. Unauthorized use of common areas. My father liked to smoke cigars. The building is 100% smoke-free. He did it anyway. He would stand on the 20th floor balcony, a common area, and smoke his Cuban cigars. Security had asked him to stop 5 times. He told the security guard, "Do you know who I am? I pay your salary." Status, warning issued, ignored. Violation 2, noise complaints. Marcus often stayed late. He liked to blast music while he worked, or host client celebrations that turned into frat parties in the boardroom. The accounting firm on the floor below had filed 12 formal complaints in the last year. Status, fines issued. Unpaid. Violation 3, unauthorized alterations. They had knocked down a structural wall to make Marcus's office bigger without getting approval from the building engineer. It was a safety hazard. Status, pending legal action. Violation 4, late payments. This was the one my father would deny until his dying breath, but the records didn't lie. They were consistently late. Not by much, maybe 5 or 10 days, but in commercial real estate, that's a breach. I had always waived the penalty. I looked at the list. Any one of these was grounds for a warning. All of them together, it was a clear breach of contract. I sat back in my chair. The city lights reflected in the glass of the window. If this were any other tenant, I would have evicted them 2 years ago. I kept them because of blood. I kept them because I was weak. But I wasn't weak anymore. My father had made it clear. I was not family. I was a stranger. He had kicked me out of his home. So why should he stay in mine? I wasn't doing this out of spite. That's what I told myself. This wasn't a tantrum. This was business. He was a bad tenant. He was a liability to the building. And he had just severed the personal relationship that was protecting him. I opened a new document. I didn't need a lawyer to draft this. I knew the lease better than anyone. I wrote it. To Richard Lawson, Managing Partner, Lawson and Associates from Sterling Property Management Ray. Notice of lease termination. My fingers flew across the keyboard. The language was standard. Cold, professional. Pursuant to Section 14B of the Commercial Lease Agreement, dated August 12, 2019, the landlord, Sterling Property Management, hereby exercises its right to terminate the lease due to repeated and uncured material breaches. I listed the breaches. The smoking, the noise, the structural damage, the arrears. You are hereby required to vacate the premises known as Suite 2000 Sterling Center within 90 days of this notice. 90 days, that was fast. In the commercial world, moving a law firm in 90 days is a nightmare. They have files, servers, furniture, client meetings. It would be chaos. It would cost them a fortune. I paused at the bottom of the email. Usually these notices are signed by management. I stared at the blinking cursor. Should I tell him? Should I sign my name? No, not yet. I wanted him to panic first. I wanted him to feel the ground shake without knowing what caused the earthquake. I wanted him to realize that he wasn't the king of the world. He was just a renter. I signed it. Sincerely, Sterling Property Management/Office of the CEO. I checked the time. It was 11:45 p.m. on Christmas Eve. My father was probably asleep, full of wine and self-righteousness, dreaming of his perfect legacy. Marcus was probably texting his friends about how he put his little sister in her place. They were comfortable. They were safe. I moved the mouse to the send button. My hand hovered there for a second. I thought about the little girl who just wanted her dad to watch her ride a bike. I thought about the teenager who wanted a good job for her grades. I said a silent goodbye to her. She didn't live here anymore. I clicked send. The email whooshed away. I closed the laptop. I finished my wine. The war had started. And for the first time in my life, I had the bigger guns. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city. Somewhere down there, in the dark, My father's phone pinged with a notification he wouldn't see until morning. "Merry Christmas, Dad." I woke up on Christmas morning to silence. Usually, Christmas morning meant chaos. It meant waking up in my childhood bedroom with the drafty window. It meant listening to my mother yell at my father to get the video camera ready. It meant rushing downstairs to watch Marcus open gifts that cost more than my tuition, while I unwrapped practical things like socks or a calendar. But this morning, there was no yelling. There was no forced smile. I woke up in my king-sized bed with sheets made of Egyptian cotton. The only sound was the hum of the city below and the quiet whir of the heating system. I stretched and looked at the ceiling. For a split second, I felt that old panic, the feeling that I was late, that I had done something wrong, that I was about to be criticized. Then I remembered, I didn't have to go there. I didn't have to sit on the uncomfortable couch. I didn't have to eat dry turkey. I was free. I rolled over and looked at my phone on the nightstand. I had put it on Do Not Disturb before I went to sleep. The screen was full of notifications. 17 missed calls, 22 text messages, most of them were from my mother, a few from Marcus, and 7 from my father. I didn't unlock the phone. I didn't read the texts, not yet. I knew exactly what they said. They weren't calling to apologize for kicking me out. They were calling because they had opened their email. I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of coffee, black, strong, from a machine that cost $2,000. I stood by the window and watched the snow fall on the city. It looked peaceful. My plan for the day was simple. I had an investor breakfast at 10 a.m. It might sound strange to work on Christmas, but in my world, money doesn't sleep. I was meeting with a venture capital group from Dubai. They were in town for the holiday, and they wanted to close a deal on a mixed-use development I was building in the Arts District. It was a $15 million deal. I showered and dressed. I didn't wear the mouse clothes I wore to my parents' house. I put on a tailored navy blue power suit. I wore my diamond stud earrings. I put on my Rolex. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't Elizabeth the failure. She was Elizabeth the CEO. I drove the Aston Martin to the hotel where the meeting was held. The streets were empty. When I walked into the private dining room, the investors stood up. "Miss Lawson," the lead investor said, shaking my hand. "Thank you for meeting us on the holiday." "Opportunity is the best gift," I said, smiling. We sat down. For 2 hours, we didn't talk about family. We didn't talk about drama. We talked about cap rates, zoning laws, and return on investment. I was in my element. I was sharp. I answered every question before they finished asking it. I negotiated hard. By the time the coffee was cold, they had signed the papers. I had just closed a $15 million deal while eating a croissant. As I walked out of the hotel, I felt a buzz in my pocket. It was my phone again. It was Marcus. I decided to finally look at the damage. I sat in my car in the valet circle and unlocked the screen. The texts were a timeline of panic. 8 a.m. Mom. Elizabeth, where are you? We are opening gifts. 8:30 a.m. Mom. Your father is very upset you aren't here to apologize. 9:15 a.m. Marcus. Dad just got an email. Is this a joke? 9:20 a.m. Marcus. Pick up the phone, Liz. 9:30 a.m. Dad, call me now. 10 a.m. Dad. This is not funny. Who do you think you are? 11 a.m. Dad. Elizabeth, I am warning you. Fix this. I read them slowly. I could hear their voices in my head. My father wasn't used to being told no. He wasn't used to consequences. He thought the email was a mistake or a prank or a glitch. He couldn't process the idea that he was actually being evicted. I scrolled to the voicemail tab. I played the most recent one from my father. Elizabeth, this is your father. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but it ends now. I received a ridiculous email from some management system claiming our lease is terminated. It says we have 90 days. You need to call me and explain why you would let your spam email do this. Do you know the stress you are causing your mother? Call me immediately. He still didn't get it. He thought I had sent a spam email. He didn't understand that I was the management. He sounded angry, but underneath the anger, I heard something else. Fear. Lawson and Associates had been in the Sterling Center for 5 years. Their entire brand was built on that location. It was prestigious. It was central. Moving would cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. It would disrupt their cases. It would make them look unstable to their clients. He knew that, and he was terrified. I didn't call him back. I wasn't ready to give him the satisfaction of a conversation. Not yet. I opened my messaging app and typed a single text to my father. Congratulations on the termination notice. These things happen. Merry Christmas. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone, put the car in gear, and drove to the movies. I bought a large popcorn and watched a comedy alone. I laughed louder than I had in years. The day after Christmas is usually quiet. But for me, it was the day the bomb finally detonated. I was in my office at the Sterling Center, my building, at 8 a.m. My office is on the top floor, the penthouse suite. It's 20 floors above my father's office. I told my assistant Sarah to put all calls from Richard Lawson or Marcus Lawson through to me directly. Are you sure? Sarah asked. She knew the situation. They've called the main line 10 times already. I'm sure, I said. Let them sweat for another hour, then put them through. I spent the morning reviewing the file. I wanted to be prepared. I had the lease agreement printed out on my desk. I had the photos of the smoking violations. I had the logs of the noise complaints. At 9:30 a.m. my desk phone buzzed. Elizabeth, Sarah said, it's him, line 1. I took a deep breath. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment I had been training for my whole life. I picked up the receiver. This is Sterling Property Management, Office of the CEO, I said calmly. Elizabeth, my father's voice exploded in my ear. He wasn't yelling, he was roaring. Elizabeth, stop this nonsense right now. Do you have any idea what kind of morning I've had? I've been trying to reach the owners of this building for 24 hours. And now I get put through to you. What are you doing? Are you working as a receptionist now? He thought I was the secretary. He thought I was answering the phone for the boss. Dad, I said, keeping my voice low and steady, I'm not the receptionist. Then why are you answering the phone? Put me through to the CEO. I need to speak to the person in charge. Someone sent a termination notice to my firm, and I am going to sue them for every penny they have. You can't sue the landlord for enforcing the lease, Dad, I said. Enforcing, it's a mistake. We are excellent tenants. Now put me through to your boss. I don't have time to chat with you. I closed my eyes. Even now, even when he was desperate, he was condescending. He couldn't imagine a world where I held the cards. Dad, I said clearly, you are speaking to the boss. There was a pause. What? I said, you are speaking to the boss. I am the CEO of Sterling Property Management. Don't lie to me, Elizabeth. It's pathetic. I'm not lying. Sterling Property Management is my company. I founded it 7 years ago. The Sterling Center is my building. I bought it 5 years ago. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. It was the sound of a worldview shattering. You own the building, he whispered. Yes, I own the building. I own the parking garage. I own the land. I have been your landlord for 5 years, Dad. Every rent check you signed, it went to me. Every repair request you submitted, my team approved it. That's impossible, he stammered. You're a consultant. You drive a Honda. I drive a Honda when I visit you because you treat me like garbage if I show any success, I said. I didn't want to bruise your ego, but I'm done protecting your ego. Elizabeth, his voice changed. The anger evaporated, replaced by shock. If you own the building, then you can stop this. You can cancel the notice. This is just a misunderstanding, right? A family spat. It's not a spat, I said. It's business. You are a bad tenant, Dad. A bad tenant. I'm your father. And at Christmas dinner, you told me I was an embarrassment. You told me to pack my bags. You kicked me out of your house. That was heat of the moment, he pleaded. We were stressed. Marcus was. Look, we didn't mean it. You meant it, I said. You've meant it for 29 years. You think I'm a failure. You think I'm nothing. So I'm treating this strictly as a business transaction. I reviewed your file. You smoke in the stairwells. Marcus throws parties that disturb other tenants. You are consistently late on rent. You have violated the lease 12 times. Elizabeth, please, he said. He sounded small. Moving the firm. It will kill us. We lose the address. We lose the prestige. It will cost a fortune. You can't do this to family. You already did it to family, I replied. You kicked me out. Now I'm kicking you out. You have 90 days. I suggest you start packing. The elevators are busy in the mornings, so you might want to schedule the movers for the weekend. Wait, he shouted. Let's talk. Come to dinner tonight. Anywhere you want. My treat. We can discuss this. I'm busy tonight, I said. I have a life to get together. Isn't that what you told me to do? Elizabeth, goodbye, Dad. If you have questions about the move-out checklist, you can email my assistant. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of my office. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release. I had done it. I had finally told him the truth. And he hadn't been proud. He hadn't been impressed. He had been scared. He finally saw me. He didn't see a daughter he could bully. He saw a force of nature he couldn't control. The next 90 days were a slow-motion car crash for my family. In the commercial real estate world, news travels fast. But I kept it professional. I didn't gossip. I didn't brag. I just let the process happen. My father tried to fight it. He hired a lawyer, ironic, since he was a lawyer, to challenge the lease termination. His lawyer sent a threatening letter to Sterling Property Management. I forwarded it to my legal team. My team replied with a 300-page document attaching every single photo, timestamp, and email proving their violations. They dropped the challenge 3 days later. They knew they couldn't win. The evidence was overwhelming. So they had to move. I didn't go down to the 20th floor to watch, but my building manager gave me updates. "They are panicking," he told me. "Mr. Lawson is screaming at the movers. The son, Marcus, is throwing things into boxes. It's a mess." They couldn't find a space in the Sterling Center's class. No other Class A building had a vacancy that large on such short notice. And even if they did, word had gotten out that Lawson and Associates were difficult tenants. They had to settle. They leased a floor in the old textile building on the edge of the city. It was a Class B building. It had drafty windows, slow elevators, and no view. It was a humiliating downgrade. The cost was astronomical. They had to pay for the rush movers. They had to pay to print new stationery, new business cards, new marketing materials with the new address. They had to pay the lease break fees on their equipment. All in, it cost them nearly $400,000. But the real cost was their reputation. 2 of their biggest clients dropped them. One was a bank that didn't like the instability of a firm that got evicted. The other was a tech company that simply said, "If you can't manage your own lease, how can you manage our litigation?" Marcus called me about a month into the process. I picked up the phone. "Are you happy?" he spat. "Are you happy now, you psycho?" "Hello, Marcus," I said calmly. "You ruined Dad's firm," he shouted. "You ruined everything. Do you know how much money we're losing? Do you know how embarrassing this is? I had to explain to Judge Henderson why we're moving to the ghetto." "The textile building is hardly the ghetto, Marcus," I said. "It's an up-and-coming neighborhood. It's a dump. And it's your fault." "It's not my fault," I said. "I didn't smoke cigars in the stairwell. I didn't throw frat parties on a Tuesday. I didn't call my landlord a failure at Christmas dinner." "This is about revenge," he said. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous because Dad loves me more." "Maybe he does," I said. The words didn't hurt anymore. "But right now, I don't need his love. I need his office space. And you're in it. So please hurry up with the packing." "I hate you," he said like a child. "I know," I said. "But rent is due on the 1st at the new place. Don't be late." I hung up. It was strange. For years, I thought their approval was the oxygen I needed to breathe. I thought if they cut me off, I would die. But watching them flail, watching them face consequences for the first time in their lives, I realized something. They were weak. Their power was an illusion. It was built on bullying and bluster. As soon as someone stood up to them, someone with actual power, they crumbled. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the architect of my own life. And for the first time, I was also the architect of their 6 months past. The dust had settled. Lawson and Associates was operating out of their cramped new office. I heard from mutual acquaintances that my father had aged 10 years. He was quieter. He didn't brag as much at the country club. I hadn't spoken to them since the eviction. Then came the night of the Children's Hospital Charity Gala. This is the biggest event of the social season. Tickets cost $1,000. Everyone who is anyone attends. Judges, politicians, CEOs. In previous years, I wasn't invited. My parents would go, and Marcus would go, and I would stay home. This year, I wasn't just attending. I was a gold sponsor. I had donated $50,000 to the new pediatric wing. My name, Elizabeth Lawson, was printed in bold letters on the program, right next to the bank presidents and the mayor. I arrived in a black limousine. I wore a floor-length emerald green gown that cost more than my first car. My hair was swept up. I wore a necklace of diamonds and emeralds. I walked the red carpet. Photographers flashed their cameras. Miss Lawson, over here," I smiled. I was used to it now. I walked into the ballroom. It was glittering with lights and music. I grabbed a glass of champagne and began mingling. People came up to me to shake my hand. "Elizabeth, wonderful to see you." "Elizabeth, thank you for the donation." "Elizabeth, I'd love to discuss a project with you." I was the center of gravity. Then I saw them. My father and mother were standing near the buffet. They looked tired. My father's tuxedo looked a little loose, like he had lost weight. My mother looked anxious, scanning the room, trying to see who was watching them. They didn't see me at first. They were looking at the program booklet. I watched as my father opened the page to the list of donors. I saw him freeze. He pointed at the page. My mother looked. Her hand went to her mouth. They stared at the name. Elizabeth Lawson. Then they looked up. They scanned the room, searching. Their eyes locked on me. I didn't look away. I didn't shrink. I raised my glass slightly in a toast. My father said something to my mother. He straightened his tie. He took a deep breath. And then he started walking toward me. The crowd parted for him, but not because he was important. They moved because he looked like a man walking to the gallows. He stopped 3 feet in front of me. Marcus wasn't there, probably too ashamed to show his face. It was just my parents. Elizabeth, my father said. His voice was raspy. Hello, Dad, Mom, I said politely. We saw your name in the program, he said, gesturing vaguely. Gold sponsor, that's a significant contribution. It's a good cause, I said. He looked at me, really looked at me. He looked at the gown, the jewels, the confidence in my posture. He looked at the people around me who were waiting for his turn to end so they could talk to me. He realized in that moment that he had been wrong about everything. He had bet on the wrong child. He had thrown away the diamond and kept the stone. He struggled with the words. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said simply. I was wrong, he whispered. It was the first time in my life I had heard him admit it. I was wrong about you, about your career, about everything. My mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Elizabeth, we miss you, Christmas was. It was a mistake, we were just stressed. Can't we put this behind us, we're family. Family, I repeated. The word tasted bitter. Yes, my father said, gaining a little hope. Family, I'm proud of you, Elizabeth. Look at you, you're a success. You're a Lawson. We should be celebrating this together. Why don't you come by the house on Sunday? We can have dinner, start over. I looked at him. I saw the desperation. He wanted to claim me again. He wanted to attach himself to my success now that his own was fading. He wanted to be the father of the wealthy CEO, not the father of the failure. It was tempting. The little girl inside me screamed, say yes. He's finally proud. But I wasn't a little girl anymore. I appreciate the invitation, I said slowly, but I'm afraid I can't make it. Why not? He asked, hurt. Because I realized something, I said. You're only proud of me because I have money. You're only proud because I have power. If I were still the girl in the Honda, you wouldn't be standing here. You wouldn't be apologizing. That's not true, my mother sobbed. It is true, I said gently. And that's okay, I accept it. But I don't have to participate in it. Elizabeth, please, my father said. Can we start over? I looked him in the eye. Maybe, I said, but not yet. It took you 29 years to see me, Dad. It might take me a while to trust you. I understand, he nodded, defeated. Enjoy the evening, I said. The chicken is very good. I turned my back on them. I walked back into the crowd of my peers. I didn't look back. I left the gala at midnight. My driver took me back to the Spire Tower. The city was quiet. The lights blurred past the window. I felt tired, but it was a good tired. It was the exhaustion of someone who had carried a heavy weight for a long time and finally set it down. I went up to the penthouse. I didn't turn on the lights. I just walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. I could see the Sterling Center from here. It stood tall and dark against the sky. My building, my legacy, and somewhere in the distance, I could see the faint outline of the textile building where my father was probably sitting in his cramped office, trying to figure out how to save his firm. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel the need for revenge. I just felt peace. For so long, I had defined myself by their rejection. I thought I was the unwanted one. I thought I was the failure. But looking at the city I had helped build, I realized the truth. Their rejection was the best thing that ever happened to me. If they had accepted me, I would have become a lawyer. I would have worked at his firm. I would have been miserable, trying to fit into a mold that was too small for me. Because they ignored me, I was free. Because they underestimated me, I could take risks. Because they didn't watch me, I could grow without limits. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I sat on my white sofa, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. Good night, Elizabeth. You looked beautiful tonight. I am sorry. I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I realized I had already won. Not because I had more money. Not because I had evicted them. But because I no longer needed them to tell me who I was. I was Elizabeth Lawson. I was a CEO. I was a builder. I was a survivor. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I passed a mirror in the hallway. I stopped and looked at myself. I saw the fine lines around my eyes from working late nights. I saw the set of my jaw, stubborn and strong. I saw the woman who had built an empire from silence. I smiled. They saw a disappointment because that's the story they wanted, I whispered to the empty room. They missed the empire because they never thought to look. I turned off the light. The city outside kept shining, and for the first time in my life, I knew I shone just as bright.